Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. You're tuned in to Fuel Yourself Fabulous Live.tv, and I'm your host, Sabrina Khan, and I've got a really fantastic interview lined up today. And I know I say this every week, but I've just had some phenomenal guests on in the last couple of weeks, just some real movers and shakers in their field. But before I introduce them, I just want to give you the reasons for why I set up this platform and why I'm so passionate about it. I set this up because I do think that we're living in a world where there's a lot of sort of obesity problems and sort of health problems are all time. There's a lot of health problems around as well, and I do believe in food as a healing tool, food and lifestyle for healing. So my whole series for the next couple of months is based on IBS and sort of diets around it, because I myself suffered from it for a long time, and through clean eating I managed to manage my symptoms. So today I've got the FODMAP research team from Monash, and that is actually the university that spearheaded the FODMAP diet, the scientifically proven diet to heal IBS symptoms, and it's effective over 75% of the time. So I'm gonna there's a bit of echoing. Can you hear some echoing, guys?
Yeah, a little bit. 1 minute.
There's a little bit of echoing on my side.
Is that better now?
Yes, much better. Sorry about this. We've been testing all morning and it's been fine. But I'm going to pass you over to the Monash University research team. So do you want to introduce yourself, guys?
Yep, sure. Thanks, Sabrina. I'm Marina Yapu. So I'm one of the PhD researchers here with the team. I'm also an accredited practicing dietitian, which I'm working in the area at the moment with pediatrics, infants in particular, is my research is focusing on. And I also teach with the university casually, so it's busy times, but we do a lot of research here in a number of different areas. So, but my focus at the moment is with pediatrics in the team. And my name's Caroline Tuck. I'm also a PhD researcher and also an accredited practicing dietitian. So my PhD topic is it is looking at FODMAPs and sort of furthering on from some of the work that our team has already done here. And I also work on the side as well. So I work in a private practice, mostly seeing patients with irritable bowel syndrome and other gut disorders. And I also do some work in a hospital here in Melbourne as well.
And I'm CK Yao. I'm also doing my PhD full-time and also an accredited practicing dietitian. My research focus is mainly on diet and inflammatory bowel disease. So it's a slightly different area, but I've been involved in quite a lot of research involving irritable bowel syndrome, particularly diet and probiotics. At the same time, I'm also working privately, seeing clients as well, and helping them to manage their irritable bowel syndrome symptoms and applying the low FODMAP diet as well.
Brilliant. And you guys all work directly under Dr. Jane and Peter Gibson, and sort of a lot of the figures that actually spearheaded the diet and have written a lot of research papers about it that people will know of.
Yeah, correct. They're actually, both of those people, Professor Peter Gibson and Dr. Jane, both of them are our supervisors in our PhD studies as well. So we work very closely with them in all the research that happens here, as well as our own studies. So it's across the board, they're across everything here.
Yeah. They're also renowned in the world as experts in management of irritable bowel syndrome as well. Yeah.
We're very lucky here as well to have a whole team that we work with. So we've got staff in the lab who do a lot of the food analysis, and yeah, all sorts of staff here, other research dietitians, psychology background. So yeah, we're very lucky in that our team is growing, and we have a lot of different, I guess, professions and backgrounds that we can draw knowledge from as well.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, so this is information right from first source here about FODMAP and the diet and sort of ongoing testing and research. So just very briefly, because I've had obviously lots of guests on that have gone into FODMAPs, but what is the FODMAP diet and how did it come about? Okay,
I'll explain just briefly, because I'm sure a lot of your viewers may already know what FODMAP refers to. But briefly, just to introduce it, is about the short chain carbohydrates that are indigestible through our gut. And for some people, they can be quite problematic if they're, just having some irritable bowel symptoms such as diarrhea. There may be constipation, there may be some abdominal pain, some distension, and these sugars that are naturally found in our diet and are very good for us, so we need to remember that they're very good for us, is that in some instances, depending on the dose that we're consuming, it can be problematic for some people. So, and that's with adults that have irritable bowel syndrome. What we tend to do is actually reduce the amount of FODMAPs they have in their diet, and then to see if we can manage their symptoms that way. So FODMAPs is the term given for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So it's an acronym for these sugars. And essentially it's becoming now, in particular in Australia, as the first line of treatment in irritable bowel syndrome above pharmaceutical strategies. So it's becoming, yeah, as I said, the first line of treatment at the moment.
And I'm all for that, a treatment based on food rather than sort of pharmaceutical intervention. But, I've heard various things. I mean, I guess it depends on the kind of patients you treat and the clients, but does this diet work better for IBS-D, which is because people with diarrhea predominant, or IBS-C, which is people with constipation predominant, or what's been your sort of experience with this?
So I would probably suggest that regardless of the type of IBS, it's certainly still worth trying a low FODMAP diet, because response can, you can get a good response with both constipation and diarrhea predominant, and also in those with mixed type. And for some people, certainly the diarrhea predominant can respond really well. But that doesn't mean that someone with constipation predominant IBS won't respond. It's still definitely worth giving it a try in that scenario as well.
And the big randomized controlled trial that we did, I think, and we published in 2014, that research showed that the effectiveness of the low FODMAP diet was equal in all the different types of irritable bowel syndrome patients, regardless of whether they're constipation predominant or diarrhea predominant, or if they have mixed bowel habits, or
Okay, brilliant. So it can work across the board. So what are the different phases of this diet then? Obviously there's a few stages, and it's not meant to be a permanent diet. So do you want to tell us about that briefly?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the most important thing to remember with the low FODMAP diet is, before you even consider starting one, it's really important to consult your doctor first, just to make sure that everything else has been ruled out that might be a bit more sinister. So things like celiac disease, IBD, other disease states that really need to be ruled out before you change your diet. Part of why that's so important is that if you take certain things, especially wheat, out of the diet, and then you go and get tested for things like celiac disease, that testing may actually not be accurate. So I think that's something really important, that sometimes people skip that step and go straight to playing around with their diet, and it can actually be detrimental to do it that way. So yeah, firstly, once we know that someone definitely has had everything else ruled out and we know they definitely have IBS, then usually we would look at a restrictive phase or following a low FODMAP diet relatively strictly, which we would often do for around 4 weeks. So we try and get them to follow the dietary restrictions for a 4-week period. I always say during that 4 weeks, so it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, and it doesn't matter if someone ends up eating out for dinner and having a bit of onion or whatever it might be, but just trying to overall reduce their FODMAP load or reduce the number of high FODMAP foods they're eating across that 4-week period. And usually that 4 weeks is enough to see whether or not the diet is going to help, and usually it does at least help a little bit, if not a lot, for patients and their symptoms. So during that time, we've got some great resources which we can use and which are now internationally available, which is excellent. So often we might use, we've got a booklet here, which we use a lot in Australia, which is regularly updated with all of the FODMAP testing. And then now I'm sure you know about our smartphone application as well. So the app has been very useful, thanks CK. The app's been just a really good way for us to disseminate that information across really worldwide, and we know now that the app's been downloaded in many different countries. I'm not sure what we're up to now, but yeah, it's definitely a good way for us to be able to get that information across. So generally we'll get our patients to use the app, and it's a handy thing to have in the supermarket and things like that, so that people can be checking what they're buying. And yeah, use the app for that 4-week period. After that more stricter phase, we then go through what we would call a challenging phase or a reintroduction phase. So during the reintroductions, and this is where a dietitian can really help to help people to go through this process, because it's about trying to assess people's tolerance to the different FODMAP subgroups. So a lot of people are often able to tolerate some of the FODMAPs and reintroduce them back into their diet, but they may tolerate some FODMAPs better than others. So for example, they might tolerate fructose well, or they might tolerate lactose, but they might have more difficulty tolerating fructans, so things like the wheat and the onion and garlic. So it's about assessing the tolerance to those groups, but also the quantity and the frequency. So often I find with my patients, they can tolerate some wheat, they just can't eat as much wheat as they used to. So they might have previously had wheat at breakfast, lunch and dinner, and now they can only have it once a day or a few times a week or whatever it might be. So it's also about trying to work out that frequency, and I think that's where people that don't use a dietitian will end up sort of stuck on the diet and tend to follow it more strictly. But by using a dietitian to help you re-challenge and test your tolerance to those groups, often people are able to reintroduce a lot more back into their diet.
Yeah, so that's why it's so important to use a dietitian, healthcare professional, because I see people in groups all the time and they've been on the diet for such a long time, but that can actually have a negative overall effect, because like we said, a lot of these foods are actually prebiotics, so they're actually good for overall stomach health. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we don't recommend prolonged restriction of FODMAP intake in people's diets. We have seen that after restricting the FODMAP intake for approximately 8 weeks, if it is a dietitian instructed diet, that they have lower levels of the good bacteria in their gut. And we also did another study that looked at feeding people on either low FODMAP diet compared to say an Australian diet, so one that's high in baked beans and bread for breakfast, for example, and we found that there were differences in the bugs that were found in the large bowel, particularly those that were associated with better bowel health in the long term. And so we think that by reducing these prebiotics in the long run, we may be changing the type of gut bacteria in our gut, and we don't know what sort of effects that may have in the long run. But yeah, that's why we always recommend that they do something about it after their symptoms are better.
And what foods in particular have prebiotic, like good gut health qualities?
All the FODMAPs will have, so you've got all your fruits and vegetables that you may restrict. You may have all the legumes, so you've got your lentils, your chickpeas, also have them. So it's right across the FODMAP group to varying levels. So you can't really say these ones will not change your gut bacteria and these ones will. They actually will all have an element of that, because prebiotics, they're oligosaccharides and naturally prebiotics in our food. So, and that's why there's been seen a change in the gut flora. But you know, we can't say what type of negative effect it is, but we can also say it's a positive, because we know that prebiotics are a good bacteria for our gut. So, and hence why we say it's really important to make sure we're introducing foods, because essentially what you're doing is you've changed the variety of your food as well, which is key to good nutrition. So any restriction needs to be well managed, so that there's a balanced diet. So whether it's a gluten-free diet for the benefit for those that have celiac disease, they still need to be managed carefully, because they need to ensure that they're having a healthy, balanced diet, meeting all the core food groups. So it's the same thing with the low FODMAP diet. So although it's not a condition where the gut is being damaged in IBS, you still need to monitor how well the diet is being used, because there may be food groups people then become fearful of having. So with any diet, so I guess it's no different to any program that needs to be managed carefully, and make sure that we're not applying too many restrictions to ourselves and then we become fearful of having them again. So and that's why a dietitian can make sure that behaviourally as well, we don't have people afraid of reintroducing foods.
Yeah, I mean, I've read the prebiotic food groups in particular are leeks and onions and garlic, so they have a lot.
Yes.
They have a lot of good prebiotic qualities to them, and there is generally a lot of work done on the microbiome, so that's why we know that it is so important to keep the good bugs in. But so I was asked a question actually in a group when she said that she was on the FODMAP diet for a long time. Clearly she didn't go back to a dietitian, or she didn't use a dietitian, and the gut bacteria got so low she got ill. So how can you help that situation? You know, I mean, obviously the obvious answer is introduce some good foods, but is there anything else? Is there anything you'd like to add to that, or your own thoughts with that?
So the changes in gut bacteria, they're often temporary. So when you do take away the prebiotics, that's when you see the changes in the gut bacteria, and they often occur in the short term. But then when you put them back, the bugs do then tend to then revert to a better profile, if you can say so. And so it's not going to be a permanent change to the gut microbiome. And I guess the other thing is if somebody varies their diet when they're on the low FODMAP diet, so even if they're trying FODMAPs that may be moderate in their FODMAP content, they may be able to still get some level of prebiotics in their diet rather than none at all. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that. So if you think of wheat, for instance, previously some people were eating them quite excessively. So pulling back on wheat-containing products they may naturally just feeling better just on a lower dose, but that's because their dose was so high to begin with. So yeah, so that, you know, so it might be someone that's having a very, very high carbohydrate diet, predominantly wheat-based, and is feeling the effects of excessive wheat. So just pulling it back sometimes might be just bringing it back to a healthy, balanced diet.
Yes. Yes. No, it makes a lot of sense. But that's really great news that the gut flora, if it's out of balance, it's temporary, and as soon as you start introducing sort of prebiotics into your diet again, you can start balancing it. And I know I know this wasn't a question on the questions, but I'm just going to ask, and if it's not your area of remit, then obviously that's fine. But do probiotic tablets help? You know, because a lot of people inquire about, you know, probiotics to be taken as supplements and what's the best. And I personally know which ones are recommended by some top, you know, gastroenterologists. But what about in your experience?
So with probiotics, what they do is they cultivate the type of bacteria that is in that probiotic, whether it's a capsule or a yogurt or a powder form. So they tend to favor the growth of that particular bacteria strain in the large intestine. What we haven't found is that the type of probiotics that are available in Australia don't tend to be as effective, and so there could be some that do benefit, but often we find that with clients, they say that the improvement is quite small.
Yes.
But there could be people with mild symptoms who don't really need a restrictive low FODMAP diet that may benefit from just taking probiotics, and in that setting that's quite helpful. Yeah, but it's important for people to try a particular strain that has worked or has been shown in research, particularly IBS research, to be effective. And when they try that product, they need to try it for 4 weeks for a minimum, and just monitor their symptoms to see if they have any adverse reactions to it. If they do, then stop and change another product. But it's all about finding the right probiotic that will both meet their body's help with the gut symptoms and also suit their body. Yeah.
Yeah, I just read that. I actually just read an article on the IBS Network, which is a registered charity here in the UK, and that's exactly what they said, that you need to look for a probiotic that's been tested and depends on the strain in it, and you test it for a minimum of a month to see if it has any beneficial qualities for you. So that's another really, really great point. Anything else that you'd like to add about sort of prebiotics and probiotics?
I think the thing we always need to remember, if it does work on one person, it may not work on the other, because we all have a different flora to begin with. So to treat it, there's not one treatment for everyone. So hence why the FODMAP diet is not managed the same way for every patient either, and the introduction phase isn't the same for everyone. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And I think that can go with any therapy, whether it's probiotics or prebiotics or diet. There's a number of diets that can be beneficial. FODMAP diet seems to be one of the key ones, but if that doesn't work, then there's other dietary therapies as well. So again, that's why the importance of a dietitian comes into play, because they're across all that. Yes. And yeah, we all have a different baseline, so what's going to work for us is going to be quite different to the next person. And I think the thing with probiotics in particular, it gets used a lot with children here as well, is that there isn't any evidence to say how effective they are. The jury's out on that. But the reason why they're still walking off off the shelves in the chemist here is because they're safe. They have been found to be safe, and hence why they still are sold. So whether they're effective or not, it is inconclusive, but because they're safe, you know, some people are quite desperate, and if nothing's working, then, and they're costly, so we've kind of got to manage that with people. If that's their choice to take them, then yeah.
Yeah,
without
that's the thing.
guarantees.
They're not unsafe. They're not going to do you any harm, are they really? So, I mean, another thing that's really in vogue at the moment, and I don't know if you've done any research on that, is the sort of natural food products, fermented food products that are supposed to be laden with a lot of really good beneficial gut properties like kefir and kombucha and fermented vegetables. I mean, that's another hot topic amongst, you know, foodies everywhere. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we have got one master's student at the moment looking at, I guess, the gut health as a result of diet, just by changing the prebiotic composition through, there's nothing published yet, there's no results yet, but it's definitely something we're looking at by manipulating the diet. They're all very well balanced diets, so that's key for us, that in dietary therapy we can't compromise someone's nutrition, but we are playing around with the level of prebiotics and collecting, as we do in our industry of gastroenterology world, collecting lots of stool samples, and so that we can clearly see what type of changes are happening with the bugs.
Yes.
And it's in its infancy stage, so there's a lot to be done, but it is a trial. It's a master's study, so it is going to progress after that. But it will be some time before we know any results. But there are some interesting foods being added into these diets. The person doing it is a chef as well, so we're able to learn a lot about interesting foods and ingredients.
Yeah, that's some of the fermented food products. So they contain a particular strain of bacteria as well, and so it's quite similar to probiotics in that, again, it may not work for everyone, it may work for some people in particular, and that's great. Then that can certainly be something that they can try. But there are FODMAPs as well, because they are foods, and so we have tested a fermented product, kefir, and we found that it does have lactose, and so if somebody is lactose intolerant, then that product may not be suitable for the person, even though it's got good bacteria in it. So it's just balancing out that.
Unless it's water kefir, because water kefir, unless it's water kefir. But that's
yeah, that's right.
That's really good. That's interesting. That article will be interesting, because I know that as yet there's not really been any scientific research on the area of fermented foods. It's just traced back to ancient civilizations, and all of them used to have a fermented food product. But you know, it's a really interesting point you make about you know, FODMAPs affecting everyone differently, and probiotics and prebiotics affecting everyone differently. And I'm on this health coaching course that I'll be finished in the next couple of months, and that's exactly what they say. We're all individuals, and what one man's food might be another man's poison. So that's why there's no one size fits all. And even with the FODMAPs, one might be, you know, what might work for one is not going to work for the other. But generally, it's generally there's been a lot of positive response from it. It's 75% success rate you've seen, and I think that's why it's become so popular everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think history tells us that anyone that suffered with IBS tends to look at their own diet, because they often identify something that triggers it.
Yes.
And so that, you know, I think, you know, in history, looking back, even before the low FODMAP diet, when we looked at a lot of studies, would look at the subgroups of FODMAPs.
All right.
So there's a lot of history there, with all the different research studies that looked at maybe lactose, fructose, but individually. So it's only really in the last few years where the team here has grouped it all together for it to be termed as FODMAP.
Yes.
So that way, because often that studies would look at lactose on its own or fructose or a couple of them together, but then they wouldn't be getting the I guess the best outcome for them. There'd be some relief, but not completely. So then as the research builds over time, as it does with any area, we then find that there's more than one group to look at, and let's collectively put them together. And that's what the team here has done, is put them all together. And over time, what's really happened is the studies have grown into being an open label study through to randomized control trials to double-blind crossover studies to really keep, because they keep working.
Yes.
So now that we have the high-level evidence, and now the studies are being done across globally, so in other countries like the UK and the US and some Scandinavian countries. So, yeah.
No, brilliant, good point. And I know we touched on it. I touched on this with CK. What the other problem that I see a lot in sort of groups, and I have my own personal opinions on this, is food labeling. It's like, food, processed, packaged foods. What can we, we don't understand this. What can we eat? What do we need to keep away from? What can we eat? So, do you want to just go into a little bit about the major sort of processed, the major kind of products in these processed goods that people should look out for and keep away from?
Yeah, sure. So certainly there's a few, I guess, good ingredients to have in mind to look out for on ingredients on nutrition information panels. So some key things I think are really good to look out for are simple things that you may not, I guess, always think of when you think of low FODMAP, but even think words like fructose and those sorts of things. But that can also then lead to things like fructans, or sometimes things will be written as fructooligosaccharides, or sometimes in brackets it will actually have FOS, F-O-S.
Yes.
And also inulin, which is a type of fructan, which here in Australia is used a lot in yogurts.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see it pop up in rice crackers and sports bars and things that's sort of being used more and more, because essentially what it is it's a fibre. So products, they're purposely adding it into products to boost the fibre of the product, which normally is a good thing, but when it's a type of fibre that people don't tolerate, it's something definitely to look out for. And then really key things is really onion and garlic, which again here is used a lot as a flavour. So often patients are surprised, they say, come back and say, onion and garlic is in everything, because it is used as a flavour in pasta sauces, it's used on chips and crisps, it's used in stocks, it's used across the board as a flavour additive. So definitely onion and garlic are key. And then here certainly wheat is a big part of our diet here, so wheat and rye, but importantly trying to remember that these ingredients are really often only a problem if they're a large portion of the product. So obviously a wheat-based bread is quite high in wheat, so likely something to try and avoid, but something that's got wheat as a minor ingredient, or a soy sauce that contains a bit of wheat, something like that is probably not going to be an issue. And again, that's where people can test their tolerance. So sometimes during the challenges phase, it can be good to actually test your tolerance to a packaged food or a stock that does have garlic or onion in it, and actually use that as something to test and see if you can tolerate. The other thing that is important is that manufacturing and the fact that we're now starting to see that depending on the processing of a product, that may actually change the FODMAP content, and that's where it becomes a bit difficult. By looking at the ingredients, you may not necessarily be able to tell what the FODMAP content is of that product. So that's again where we would use trial and error and suggest that you test the product, have some and see how well you tolerate it. And we've found with some, for example, for legumes, something like a canned lentil is actually lower FODMAP, because sitting in the can, sitting in that liquid,
we do think that some of the FODMAP content is leaching out into the liquid, which means when you rinse it and use those lentils, there is a lower FODMAP content, so often tolerated better. So it's one of those things with labels that you can have a look and try and guess what the FODMAP content is, but you're not always going to know, and often we might look at a product and think it's low FODMAP, but when we test it, it's not. So food processing can have a big part to play as well.
So that's really important. So you see, it goes back to this is my main message here, that you should actually stick to real foods as much as possible. So anything plucked from a tree, from the land, from the sea, because at least that way you know what's going in, you know, and it just makes life simpler for everyone generally, and especially when they're on this diet. Do you agree?
Yeah, agree. In a lot of cases, yeah.
It does.
But although to just be the devil's advocate on that, for example, for a vegetarian on a low FODMAP diet, actually getting something out of a can like a lentil is actually a better option.
Yeah.
So just to give you the opposite to that. But yeah, in general, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think people need to be aware of in packaged goods is apple juice and pear juice. Certainly in the UK, I see that a lot. We use a lot of fruit juices as sweeteners, but that can be excessive fructose.
Yeah.
Even in cereals, so you might find a gluten-free cornflake, for example, and there's apple juice concentrate in it. So these are sort of little tips that you can educate your patients with on what to look for ingredients in the ingredients list. But also we encourage them now to, or if they have the app, they can use that while they're shopping. So that's become actually a very really good tool for people when they're actually shopping, and they can just look through the list now that way. So we also actually have I'm not sure if you know about the certification program that we now have, where manufacturers can apply to be certified as low FODMAP. So there will be there's labeling now on some food products, and they actually sign a contract to say in the processing they will keep all ingredients exactly the same. They will not change how they produce their product, so that's part of the contract agreement. And then they go through some vigorous testing here in our lab to see what their FODMAP content is, and then they can have certified as a low FODMAP, moderate FODMAP, whatever the case may be, products, generally obviously low FODMAP, and there's a great explanation of what that actually means on the packaging. So. And it's really helpful for us because every cent that is raised in the lab and even in our app and our resource booklet all goes back into the research we do. So what we keep doing is more research studies, more lab testing of food. So everything gets recycled, if you like, and all the funds just go, okay, now we can get testing onto more foods, because we get a lot of requests internationally as well. So, and we source our products internationally as well. So that's something that's been happening, so that we can keep testing other foods besides those sourced from Australia. So, which is really costly exercise. So, thankfully, these programs are allowing us to be able to do that.
The other good way for people to keep in touch with what we're doing is we've got a blog as well. I don't know if you've seen our blog, but we're trying to use that as a way to tell the public, I guess, if we have tested new foods or new things on our certification program, to get the information out there. So that's another really good I guess resource that we're trying to give everyone back, because you know, all these things do contribute to our research. So we're trying to get the information out as quickly as we can.
What's your what's your blog then that people can look on for new information on FODMAP tested foods?
Sorry, you just broke up a bit there. Can you say that again?
So what's your blog? What is your blog? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Are you asking what the blog post is?
Yes. What's your blog site URL?
Oh, okay. If you Google Monash FODMAP blog.
Okay.
You will easily find us.
I think
Yeah, I think it pretty much.
blog.
Yeah. We can look it up for you. How about we let you know?
That's fine. Monash FODMAP blog. And you've got a new app out now as well, haven't you? Very quickly. Do you just want to talk about some of the new food? I know rice milk was a big one. I think previously it was low FODMAP and now it's showing as high FODMAP. Is there any other foods that that really surprise people? Because I haven't got my version yet because I have got an Apple.
Yeah. So the iPhone update is still coming, but we decided to release the Android version of the app update first. And so there's over 150 new foods that we've tested and included in the app, so that's quite a lot. And we've also included foods that we've tested between different countries with the help of other dietitians. So we've collaborated with dietitians in the US, the UK, and Denmark, and Norway as well to help us with sourcing food samples for testing. And then these are flown across halfway around the world to Australia. And then some of the foods that we've tested, for example, in the US are all the different breads. And so trying to find breads that are low FODMAP. That will be quite helpful for the people in the US. So other foods such as plant milk, so almond milk is one of the things that we've also tested, and it is low.
Oh, brilliant. That's good news.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Yeah, so we weren't sure in the past about whether almond milk was suitable or not on the low FODMAP diet, but now we know.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And Sabrina, I've just got the blog thing here, so it's fodmapmonash.blogspot.com.au.
Brilliant. So that's up-to-date information. And just so I'm clear on this now, because I'm in the UK, there's actually, so I know in Australia there's FODMAP, there's a logo for FODMAP friendly food. So are you saying that it's available internationally now as well? So people in the US and the UK will have foods that might have this logo. Has it come across to the UK yet?
So our logo is the low Monash University certified low FODMAP foods. It's actually a little blue logo, and any food products that have our logo will also appear on the app. We haven't actually extended that program internationally.
Right.
There is obviously a potential for any companies that are interested in having their products certified and associated with Monash University to contact us and be involved in that process. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities to reach out to international food products.
Okay. Okay. And obviously the UK has their own testing, because it's a team that is headed by Heidi over at King's College. Is that correct? So because I know I've got the UK food booklets, and I've obviously got the Monash app, and there is discrepancies, and I couldn't figure it out, but now you've just made that clear. So the UK has got their own testing and you guys have got your own testing.
And with any testing, really, there's so many things that can affect it that might end up in those discrepancies. So even, for example, fruits and veg, if something's been grown in a particular season, or there's been drought or whatever it might be, that could then affect the FODMAP content. Or so that's why sometimes there will be differences, and it's one of those things that there's not much we can do, but those differences overall in terms of following a low FODMAP diet are probably not going to make a big difference in terms of the symptom improvement that people should feel.
And that's why, I see people get so hung up about tiny little bits of information. I myself had one of my blog posts totally ripped apart for stuff, and I was like, this information that firstly a lot of it was perception. It's like IBS sufferers generally have delicate, sensitive stomach. So my advice is, if you can, stick to fresh, and if you can, stick to organic if you can afford it. And I know it's not a requirement, but hey, it's a suggestion, you know, but and people get so hung up, but like you're saying yourself, depending on who's testing it, depending on the season, I mean, you've even found differences in foods that you tested before and after. There's going to be some discrepancies.
Yeah, there's a lot of discrepancies between brands. There'll be discrepancies between varieties of the same food, between apples, and I just did a blog post this week. It's not on yet, it's not up yet, but it's coming. Just to say that with nutrients in general, so for example, vitamin C goes down when an orange is exposed to sunlight. The same with vitamin B in milk goes down. I remember growing up in London and hearing about, you know, all the bottles of milk we used to have to drink and would sit out in the sun. So the vitamin B levels would have been going down, not that I knew that then. But, you know, and just the fibre content changes, the kilojoule content changes when we're talking about dehydration of food. So, and I think what a message really is really going back to, it's a guide. Yes. So the diet, a low FODMAP diet is a guide. It's no different to our Australian guide to healthy eating, the keyword guide. So we're all going to have how much of a serve we should be eating. You know, it's all based on our energy levels. So the IBS, it's all based on our symptom control. So that's key. If someone's symptom control is working when they're having a tablespoon of corn with something, you know, then that's okay for them. If it's not for someone else, then it's not, because, you know, you've got to remember that food also has fibre, other fibres in there. So, you know, and the reason we have IBS will vary as well. So it's really a guide,
and it's not for us to get too hung up about if we take a little bit of FODMAP item, you know, it's just about managing the overall load, reducing the overall load, literally taking it as a guide. Thank you very much for clearing that point for me.
And so if there are discrepancies between labs, or we test something one way and then the next year it's actually another brand and it's come out to be higher or lower, then, you know, these things will happen within one lab and various labs. So, but we're all on the same track though.
But on that note, we're the only lab that does the comprehensive FODMAP testing. So we do collaborate with different places as well, and different labs as well. So sometimes we also cross-check some results or particular components of FODMAP levels that they've checked. So like, for example, there may be labs that are set up to just test fructose or glucose, individual FODMAPs, and not the entire FODMAP overall subgroups. So we do collaborate between labs, and so it'll be interesting if one day we decide to both release results of the same foods that we tested. But yeah.
Okay, brilliant. You know what, we need to round up soon, but just for the listeners out there, it's a live show, and whilst I've got the team with me, and they've been absolutely excellent and cleared up lots and lots of myths and things that I see in groups everywhere. If you can leave your comments at the bottom of the page, I can get these guys to answer them for you. So questions for the Monash University research team. Okay. Let's have a look. I'm gonna have to switch, see if there's anything coming through. Okay, Caroline wants to know about, has coffee got GOS content in it, and should it be allowed on a low FODMAP diet? She's read mixed reviews about this, and we're just like clearing up.
So coffee doesn't have, so coffee on its own, black coffee, doesn't actually have any FODMAP or GOS in it. And so it is fine on a low FODMAP diet, but the only thing is caffeine on its own can actually be a gut irritant, and so it can increase the motility or how quickly your gut moves. So
yes,
it can also be a trigger for symptoms. So
so
important to be aware of how much coffee you can have.
Okay, so basically, coffee, I mean, obviously I've read it everywhere. Coffee is a common trigger for IBS and just for general gut. So it doesn't have GOS, so it's okay on the low FODMAP, but you should still try to limit it because it's just a general trigger.
That's right.
So, just to give you a little bit of a background around the testing for coffee, we actually had to, it seems straightforward to test something like test coffee, but then we actually had to think about, well, how much coffee is in a standard shot? And we actually had a bit of fun going around and going to different cafes in Melbourne and trying to actually assess what a standard coffee shot would be, and looking at, well, actually it is different from shop to shop, and of course when you make it at home you might make it to different strengths as well. So I guess a bit of a theme from today, but certainly it does, you know, everyone is different, and you might tolerate a coffee, but you might actually be better with a weaker coffee, just again from that fact that it is an irritant, and using a bit of trial and error, because perhaps you're not tolerating your coffee, but you're having a very strong one, and you know you might be better with a weaker one, for example. So I think as well it just highlights that testing a single food for its FODMAP content isn't actually very straightforward, because you know, to test an apple, well, there's a lot of different types of apples, and the way we do it here is based on our food standards. So we actually, to test apple, for example, we're testing actually 10 different apples and pooling that together and combining it. So it might seem straightforward at first, but when you start to dig in and work out how to do it, it can be quite complicated.
And there's a blog post coming up about how we do our food testing. And so that.
Okay, brilliant.
I want to comment on the coffee question about the GOS. I'm wondering if the question was confused with tea, because that does have oligos in it, and black tea. And that's where the testing, again, we've had to test for weak tea. So how many times you dangle your tea bag versus a strong tea, the oligosaccharide content goes up. So I just wanted to flag that. So I just wondered if that maybe where the oligosaccharide content of coffee may have come from. It's actually in tea, black tea.
Okay, but you see, this is interesting, because obviously you've been onto my blog, I've interviewed like some of the most prominent figures in these areas, and I actually, I interviewed someone very experienced a couple of weeks ago, and they've read research that coffee does contain small amounts of GOS, so there's something somewhere, I'm sure, or I've got it mixed up, but so I think we just take these things with a pinch of salt, really.
Don't get too hung up on any one thing.
And I've got another question coming in from Pam, and Pam wants to know what are the milks then, apart from normal cow's milk, dairy, what other milks have you tested recently that are good to use? I know we've said that rice milk is a high FODMAP, and almond milk is low FODMAP. What about there's so many milks on it? There's coconut milk and quinoa milk. So yeah, what else has been tested, and can you give some information on?
There's certainly one thing we have found with the milks is that this is one area where the food processing seems to make a big difference. So different brands of the same type of milk can actually have a different FODMAP content. Yes. So yeah, we've obviously talked a bit about things like the rice and the almond milks and things, but I tend to use with my patients, I definitely encourage a bit of trial and error, because it can be worthwhile, because the processing can be quite different and make a difference. And also with things like the soy milk, depending on if it's based from the whole soybean or the soy protein, that does change the FODMAP content definitely. So I think, yeah, again, it's something where you can use a bit of trial and error.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, Kate Scolata last week mentioned that she cleared some myths and truths, and one of the things she went into was soybeans. So that's all we've got time for now. Thank you so much for coming and spending some time with me, and So if anyone wants to research any latest up and coming information, it's all on the Monash University blog. Is there another way that people can get in touch with you? Should anyone want to get, should anyone have a direct question about something?
We are also active on Twitter. So Monash FODMAP is our Twitter handle, and also we've got a Facebook page going, so Monash FODMAP again. And so there will be people answering to queries on a daily basis, so you can feel free to leave your questions or comments on our Facebook page or our Twitter handle, and don't forget to support our Monash University Law FODMAP app as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I can't recommend it enough. It's so easy, and just general knowledge and general reading is just so good. But I'm also going to leave a link on my Facebook page over the next couple of hours for up and coming shows, because I'm just getting some really, really great guests on at the moment, and even over the next few weeks I've got some fantastic guests. So I'm going to leave a link on my Facebook page. So do get onto the list there so you get notification of up and coming shows. And if you found this via my blog, then do leave me your name and email address and get your free gift, and also you'll start getting notified of up and coming shows. So thank you so much. It's Sabrina Khan with the Monash University FODMAP team, and it's over and out until the next interview.